She limped past the enemy checkpoint, blood seeping through her torn civilian clothes, her face a mask of pain and desperation. The soldiers barely glanced at her, just another wounded refugee fleeing the chaos of Kaelthara Province. They had no idea they were looking at Captain Zara Blackthorne, the most decorated Special Forces operative in the Valerian Republic's history. They had no idea that in 48 hours, their entire stronghold would fall because of the woman they'd just dismissed as harmless. And they certainly had no idea that the injury forcing her to limp was actually concealing the most advanced combat enhancement technology their enemies had ever developed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the war-torn streets of Cindermoor, a city that had once been the jewel of the Eastern Territories. Now it lay broken, its elegant spires reduced to jagged teeth against a smoke-stained sky. The Korthanian invasion had swept through like a plague, leaving devastation in its wake. What remained of the civilian population huddled in makeshift shelters, their eyes hollow with the kind of despair that only comes from watching your world burn. Captain Zara Blackthorne understood that despair intimately. She'd felt it 3 months ago when the encrypted transmission reached her unit deep in the Thornwall Mountains. Her younger brother Marcus, a communications officer stationed in Cindermoor, had been captured during the initial assault. Intelligence suggested he was being held in the Korthanian command center, a fortress they'd built in the ruins of Cindermoor's ancient cathedral. Every rescue attempt had failed. Every covert mission had ended in disaster. The Korthanian forces weren't just well-trained. They were nearly impossible to infiltrate. Their security was airtight, their technology superior, their methods brutal. They'd turned Cindermoor into an impenetrable fortress, complete with biometric scanners, thermal detection grids, and roving patrols of their infamous Crimson Guard elite soldiers, enhanced with cybernetic implants that made them faster, stronger, and deadlier than any normal human. For weeks, Zara had watched satellite feeds of the city, her jaw clenched as she studied every patrol route, every guard rotation, every weakness that might exist in their defenses. There were none. At least none that conventional tactics could exploit. The Korthanian stronghold was a perfect trap, impenetrable from the outside, inescapable from within. That's when Colonel Helena Voss, the head of Valerian Special Operations, had approached her with an offer that bordered on madness. Project Shadowmeld, a classified program that had been in development for over a decade. The technology was theoretical, untested on humans, and carried risks that the medical team couldn't even fully quantify. But it offered something no conventional weapon could: the ability to become truly invisible to both human perception and technological detection. The procedure itself had been agony beyond description. For 72 hours, Zara had lain unconscious in a sterile medical facility buried beneath the Valerian capital of Astoria, while nanobotic surgeons implanted a network of adaptive camouflage cells throughout her body. The technology was derived from deep-sea creatures found in the abyssal trenches of the midnight ocean, organisms that could alter their molecular structure to become completely transparent or mimic their surroundings with perfect precision. When she'd awakened, everything had changed. She could still move, still think, still feel, but now she could also become something else entirely. With concentration, her body could shift its optical properties, rendering her invisible to the naked eye. More remarkably, the same technology could fool thermal sensors, electromagnetic detectors, and even the advanced biometric scanners the Kortharians relied on so heavily. The catch was brutal. The technology required a constant supply of synthetic neural fluid to maintain stability. Without it, the nanobotic network would begin consuming her own nervous system, leading to paralysis, madness, and eventually death. She had perhaps 96 hours before the effects became irreversible. 96 hours to infiltrate an impenetrable fortress, locate her brother, and somehow escape with both their lives. But there was another element to her mission that Command hadn't shared with anyone else. Hidden in the lining of her jacket was a data drive containing complete intelligence on Valerian defensive positions, troop movements, and strategic plans for the next 6 months. If she was captured, if the Kortharians discovered what she carried, the entire war effort would collapse. It was the perfect cover story. Captain Zara Blackthorne, decorated war hero, had allegedly snapped under the pressure of her brother's capture. She'd stolen classified intelligence and was attempting to trade it for his life. Command had even arranged for her desertion to be discovered, complete with falsified evidence and witness testimony. As far as anyone knew, she was a traitor fleeing to enemy lines with state secrets. The genius of the deception was its simplicity. The Kortharians would be so focused on the intelligence she appeared to be carrying that they'd never suspect her true capabilities. They'd see exactly what she wanted them to see, a desperate sister driven to betrayal by love and grief. A broken soldier limping toward their checkpoint with nothing left to lose. As she approached the first guard station, Zara forced herself to think of Marcus. The fear in his voice during their last communication. The way he'd always looked up to her, even when they were children playing war games in their grandmother's garden in Millhaven. She let that pain show on her face, let it tremble in her voice as she spoke to the guards. "Please," she whispered in accented Korthanian, her words carefully slurred as if she were fighting shock and blood loss. "I have information. Important information about Valerian positions. I need to speak to your commander." The guards looked her over with the casual disdain of conquerors examining a broken enemy. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see: weakness, defeat, desperation. They had no idea that beneath her civilian disguise, every muscle in her body was coiled like a spring. They couldn't detect the microscopic weapons concealed in her hair, her fingernails, even her teeth. And they certainly couldn't see the adaptive camouflage technology that would soon make her the most dangerous person in their carefully secured city. One of the guards, a young corporal with fresh scars across his cheek, stepped forward to search her. His hands were professional but rough as he patted down her jacket, finding the data drive exactly where she'd meant for him to find it. "What's this?" he demanded, holding up the small device. Zara's eyes widened with perfectly feigned panic. "Please, don't. That's my insurance. Without it, they'll kill me. I have strategic intelligence, patrol schedules, everything your command needs to crush the Valerian resistance. Just let me speak to someone in authority." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The guards exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of opportunity their superiors would want to know about immediately. Within minutes, she was being escorted deeper into the city, toward the cathedral fortress where Marcus was being held. As they walked, Zara cataloged every detail: the placement of guard towers, the frequency of patrol changes, the locations of weapon emplacements. Her enhanced vision could detect heat signatures through walls, revealing the true size of the Korthanian force. What she saw made her blood run cold. There were far more enemy soldiers than intelligence had suggested, nearly 3,000 troops in a space that should have held fewer than 800. But she also saw something else, something that made her heart race with possibility. The Korthanian security, for all its technological sophistication, was designed to keep people out and prevent escapes. It wasn't designed to detect someone who could become invisible at will, someone who could walk through their most secure areas without triggering a single alarm. They had no idea what was coming. And that ignorance would be their downfall. As they approached the cathedral's imposing entrance, Zara allowed herself one small hidden smile. The mission was just beginning, and she was exactly where she needed to be. The interrogation room in the cathedral's lower levels was a study in psychological warfare. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly white glow that made even healthy skin look corpse pale. The walls were bare concrete, stained with rust-colored marks that could have been anything but probably weren't. A single metal table sat in the center, flanked by 2 chairs, one comfortable, one decidedly not. Zara had been waiting for 3 hours, still maintaining her cover as the desperate traitor Elena Vasquez. The false identity was bulletproof. Command had spent months building the legend, complete with fabricated service records, psychological evaluations, and even staged photographs of her and Marcus as children in a Korthanian border town that no longer existed. The door finally opened with a metallic screech that seemed designed to fray nerves. Commander Thane Darkwater entered, a man whose reputation preceded him like the smell of sulfur. Tall and lean, with prematurely silver hair and eyes the color of winter storms, he'd earned his position through a combination of tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness. Intelligence files suggested he'd personally ordered the execution of over 200 prisoners of war. Behind him came his aide, Lieutenant Vera Nightwind, a woman whose cybernetic left arm gleamed with polished chrome. She carried a tablet and wore the kind of smile that never reached her eyes, the expression of someone who enjoyed her work far too much. "Elena Vasquez," Darkwater said, settling into the comfortable chair with the casual grace of a predator. His voice carried a slight accent from the Northern Territories, cultured and precise. "Former communications specialist, 7th Valerian Infantry. Sister to Marcus Vasquez, currently our guest in the upper chambers. And now, apparently, a defector with something valuable to trade." Zara forced her hands to tremble slightly as she clutched the edge of the metal table. The performance had to be perfect. Too little fear, and they'd be suspicious. Too much, and they'd think she was lying. "I just want my brother back," she whispered, her voice cracking in exactly the right places. "The war. It's lost anyway. Everyone knows it. The Valerian Council is just too proud to admit it." Nightwind stepped forward, placing the data drive on the table between them. "This contains encrypted files, patrol schedules, supply routes, impressive intelligence for a simple communications specialist. How did you acquire it?" "I wasn't always just communications," Zara replied, allowing a hint of her real training to show through. "Before Marcus was captured, I was recruited for special operations. They gave me access codes, emergency protocols. When I heard what happened to him, I used everything I could to put together something you'd want. It was a masterful blend of truth and fiction." The Kortharians knew enough about Valerian special operations to recognize authentic intelligence when they saw it. What they didn't know was that every piece of information on that drive had been carefully selected to serve a dual purpose valuable enough to gain their trust, but ultimately designed to lead them into a carefully prepared trap. Darkwater leaned back, studying her with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "And what makes you think we'd honor any bargain with a traitor? In our culture, betraying one's own people is considered the lowest form of corruption. Why shouldn't we simply take your information and dispose of you both?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Zara felt her enhanced hearing pick up the subtle sounds of the fortress around them, guard rotations 3 floors above. The hum of computer systems, the distant sound of what might have been screaming from the interrogation chambers. She filed every detail away while maintaining her desperate facade. "Because you're smart enough to know this is just the beginning," she said, meeting his gaze with the kind of broken courage that comes from having nothing left to lose. "I have contacts, access codes that change weekly, friends in the intelligence division who trust me. This drive proves I can deliver valuable information. But if you want the really important stuff, the locations of the new weapons facilities, the evacuation plans for the civilian government, you'll need me alive and cooperative." Nightwind's cybernetic fingers drummed against her tablet in a staccato rhythm. The encryption on these files is sophisticated. Military grade, current generation. Either you're exactly who you claim to be, or someone with significant resources wants us to believe you are. Darkwater nodded slowly. Indeed, which raises the question, why should we trust anything you tell us? For all we know, this could be an elaborate deception, designed to place a spy in our midst. Zara's heart rate spiked, but she kept her expression steady. This was the critical moment, the point where her cover would either hold or shatter completely. She let genuine emotion creep into her voice as she spoke about Marcus, drawing on real memories of her brother to fuel the performance. 3 months ago, my brother called me from this city, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was scared, trapped in the communications bunker when your forces overran the garrison. The last thing he said was that he loved me, and he was sorry he'd never get to meet the woman I was supposed to marry next spring. She paused, letting a single tear track down her cheek. I don't care about the war anymore. I don't care about the Republic or their grand strategies. I just want my little brother back, and I'm willing to burn everything I once believed in to make that happen. The silence stretched for long moments. Zara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of Darkwater's scrutiny like a physical pressure. Finally, he spoke. Lieutenant Nightwind, escort our guest to the holding chambers. Not the cells, the secure quarters on sublevel 2. Post guards, but treat her as a valuable asset rather than a prisoner. We'll verify her intelligence and discuss terms once we've had a chance to examine what she's brought us. As they led her through the cathedral's converted corridors, Zara catalogued every detail of the fortress's internal layout. The Korthanians had done impressive work converting the ancient religious site into a military stronghold. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd preserved much of the original architecture, including the network of maintenance, tunnels and hidden passages that had been built into the cathedrals. Foundations centuries ago, her enhanced vision could detect the heat signatures of those forgotten spaces, mapping a three-dimensional maze that existed parallel to the official floor plan. When the time came to move, she'd have options they couldn't even imagine. The secure quarters were surprisingly comfortable, a small apartment with basic amenities, electronic locks, and surveillance cameras that she immediately identified and cataloged. As soon as the guards left her alone, Zara began the delicate process of preparing for the next phase of her mission. She had perhaps 60 hours before the neural fluid ran out. 60 hours to locate Marcus, neutralize the fortress's defenses, and complete an extraction that would require every skill she'd ever learned. The Korthanians thought they were holding a broken traitor, a desperate woman willing to sell out her own people for family. They had no idea. They just invited death itself into the heart of their stronghold. As night fell over the ruins of Cindermoor, Captain Zara Blackthorne began to plan their destruction. The secure quarters felt more like a cage with silk bars than actual accommodation. Zara spent the first hour methodically examining every surface, every fixture, every potential weakness in her gilded prison. The surveillance cameras were state-of-the-art Korthanian technology, motion tracking, infrared capable, with audio pickups sensitive enough to detect a whispered conversation through concrete walls. But they had one critical flaw. They were designed to monitor normal humans. Her enhanced vision could see the electromagnetic spectrum the cameras operated on. And more importantly, her adaptive camouflage technology could manipulate those same wavelengths. With careful concentration, she could create dead zones in their perception, spaces where the cameras would register nothing but empty air, while she moved freely within their field of view. The test came sooner than expected. At precisely 0200 hours, a soft mechanical whir announced the activation of the room's ventilation system. Zara recognized the sound pattern. It was a security sweep, designed to detect chemical traces, explosive residue, or any other contraband that might have been missed during the initial search. What the Korthanians didn't know was that the same Nanobotic network that gave her optical camouflage also allowed her to control her body's chemical emissions down to the molecular level. As the air circulation increased, she lay perfectly still on the narrow cot, regulating her breathing and heartbeat to mimic natural sleep patterns. But beneath that facade of peaceful rest, her enhanced senses were cataloging every detail of the fortress around her. Through the walls, she could detect the heat signatures of dozens of guards, the electromagnetic patterns of computer terminals, and the distinct biorhythmic signatures that indicated where prisoners were being held. Marcus was 3 floors up, in what had once been the cathedral's bell tower. His vital signs were weak but stable, alive, conscious, but clearly suffering from prolonged captivity. The knowledge that he was so close, yet still impossibly out of reach, sent a spike of genuine anguish through her chest. She used that pain, letting it fuel the desperate sister act she'd need to maintain for several more hours. Morning brought unexpected visitors. Commander Darkwater arrived with a full security detail and what appeared to be a Korthanian intelligence specialist, a thin, nervous man with the pale complexion of someone who spent his life underground analyzing data, Dr. Alexei Grimthard. According to the nameplate on his uniform, Chief Cryptographic Analyst for the Northern Division. "Your intelligence checks out," Darkwater announced without preamble, settling into the room's single chair while his guards positioned themselves by the door. "The patrol routes, supply schedules, communication frequencies, all accurate, all current. Either you're exactly who you claim to be, or someone with access to our highest security clearances wants us to believe you are." Zara forced herself to sit up slowly, maintaining the careful balance between hope and wariness that a real defector would feel. "Does that mean you'll consider my proposal? Marcus for continued intelligence cooperation?" Grimthorne stepped forward, clutching a tablet against his chest like a shield. "The encryption algorithms used on your date, they're not standard Valerian military codes. There's something newer, more sophisticated. Where exactly did you acquire these files?" It was a trap, carefully laid and expertly delivered. The wrong answer here would expose her as either a fraud or something far more dangerous than a simple communications specialist. Zara had anticipated this question, had prepared for it during the months of mission planning. But the weight of the moment still pressed against her chest like a physical force. "Special Operations Division has been developing new security protocols," she said, allowing a hint of her real knowledge to color her words. "After the Korthanian forces broke our standard encryption during the Battle of Ironbridge, Command decided we needed something stronger. I was part of the beta testing program. They needed communications specialists who could implement the new systems in the field." She paused, meeting Grimthorne's suspicious gaze with the steady look of someone telling a partial truth. "The access codes I used to compile that intelligence won't work much longer. They rotate the quantum keys every 72 hours. If you want the next batch of information, you'll need to let me establish contact with my sources within the next day." Darkwater and Grimthorne exchanged a look that spoke volumes. They were dealing with someone who clearly had legitimate access to high-level intelligence, but the timing of her defection was almost too convenient. In their position, Zara would have been equally suspicious. "There's another matter," Darkwater said, his tone shifting to something more dangerous. "Yesterday evening, our perimeter sensors detected unusual energy readings near the eastern checkpoint. The same checkpoint where you entered our territory. Our technical specialists are curious about the coincidence." Zara's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. "The adaptive camouflage technology generated trace electromagnetic emissions, barely detectable, but apparently not completely invisible to Korthanian sensors. If they connected those readings to her presence, her cover would collapse and the mission would become a fight for survival." "I don't know anything about energy readings," she said, infusing her voice with the confused frustration of someone being accused of something beyond their understanding. I walked here from the refugee camp at Millbrook, same as dozens of other people, every day. If your sensors detected something unusual, maybe you should be asking what your enemies are really planning instead of interrogating the one person trying to help you. It was a calculated risk, turning their suspicion back on them, challenging their assumptions while maintaining her desperate defector persona. The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire, filled with the weight of decisions that could determine whether she lived or died in the next few minutes. Finally, Darkwater smiled a cold expression that never reached his storm-gray eyes. Dr. Grimthorne, I think our guest raises an excellent point. Perhaps we should focus on the intelligence she's provided rather than chasing phantom readings that could have any number of explanations. The cryptographic analyst nodded reluctantly, but Zara could see he wasn't entirely convinced. She filed that concern away for later. Dr. Grimthorne would need to be dealt with carefully if her mission was to succeed. However, Darkwater continued, before we can proceed with any arrangements regarding your brother, we'll need a demonstration of good faith. Something more substantial than encrypted files and promises of future cooperation. Zara felt her pulse quicken. What kind of demonstration? Tomorrow evening, there's a Valerian supply convoy scheduled to pass through the Thornwall Valley. According to your intelligence, they'll be carrying— Your intelligence checks out, Darkwater announced without preamble, settling into the room's single chair while his guards positioned themselves by the door. The patrol routes, supply schedules, communication frequencies, all accurate, all current. Either you're exactly who you claim to be, or someone with access to our highest security clearances wants us to believe you are. Zara forced herself to sit up slowly, maintaining the careful balance between hope and wariness that a real defector would feel. Does that mean you'll consider my proposal? Marcus for continued intelligence cooperation? Grimthorne stepped forward, clutching a tablet against his chest like a shield. The encryption algorithms used on your date, they're not standard Valerian military codes. There's something newer, more sophisticated. Where exactly did you acquire these files? It was a trap, carefully laid and expertly delivered. The wrong answer here would expose her as either a fraud or something far more dangerous than a simple communications specialist. Zara had anticipated this question, had prepared for it during the months of mission planning. But the weight of the moment still pressed against her chest like a physical force. Special Operations Division has been developing new security protocols, she said, allowing a hint of her real knowledge to color her words. After the Korthanian forces broke our standard encryption during the Battle of Ironbridge, Command decided we needed something stronger. I was part of the beta testing program. They needed communications specialists who could implement the new systems in the field. She paused, meeting Grimthorne's suspicious gaze with the steady look of someone telling a partial truth. The access codes I used to compile that intelligence won't work much longer. They rotate the quantum keys every 72 hours. If you want the next batch of information, you'll need to let me establish contact with my sources within the next day. Darkwater and Grimthorne exchanged a look that spoke volumes. They were dealing with someone who clearly had legitimate access to high-level intelligence, but the timing of her defection was almost too convenient. In their position, Zara would have been equally suspicious. There's another matter, Darkwater said, his tone shifting to something more dangerous. Yesterday evening, our perimeter sensors detected unusual energy readings near the eastern checkpoint. The same checkpoint where you entered our territory. Our technical specialists are curious about the coincidence. Zara's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. The adaptive camouflage technology generated trace electromagnetic emissions, barely detectable, but apparently not completely invisible to Korthanian sensors. If they connected those readings to her presence, her cover would collapse and the mission would become a fight for survival. I don't know anything about energy readings, she said, infusing her voice with the confused frustration of someone being accused of something beyond their understanding. I walked here from the refugee camp at Millbrook, same as dozens of other people, every day. If your sensors detected something unusual, maybe you should be asking what your enemies are really planning instead of interrogating the one person trying to help you. It was a calculated risk, turning their suspicion back on them, challenging their assumptions while maintaining her desperate defector persona. The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire, filled with the weight of decisions that could determine whether she lived or died in the next few minutes. Finally, Darkwater smiled, a cold expression that never reached his storm-gray eyes. Dr. Grimthorne, I think our guest raises an excellent point. Perhaps we should focus on the intelligence she's provided rather than chasing phantom readings that could have any number of explanations. The cryptographic analyst nodded reluctantly, but Zara could see he wasn't entirely convinced. She filed that concern away for later. Dr. Grimthorne would need to be dealt with carefully if her mission was to succeed. However, Darkwater continued, before we can proceed with any arrangements regarding your brother, we'll need a demonstration of good faith. Something more substantial than encrypted files and promises of future cooperation. Zara felt her pulse quicken. What kind of demonstration? Tomorrow evening, there's a Valerian supply convoy scheduled to pass through the Thornwall Valley. According to your intelligence, they'll be carrying medical supplies and communications equipment to the resistance camps in the southern provinces. We want real-time intelligence on that convoy route changes, security details, anything that might help us intercept it. The request hit like a physical blow. If she provided the information they wanted, real Valerian soldiers would die. People who trusted her, who had served alongside her, who had families waiting for them to come home. But if she refused, her cover would collapse, and Marcus would remain a prisoner or worse. I'll need access to a secure communication terminal, she said finally, hating herself for each word. And I'll need assurance that my brother is safe and unharmed. I want to see him before I provide any additional intelligence. Darkwater's smile, what she discovered made her blood run cold. The Korthanian installation wasn't just a regional command center. It was the primary coordination hub for their entire continental invasion strategy. Real-time feeds showed troop movements across 12 provinces. Supply chain logistics for an army of nearly 200,000 soldiers, and most chilling of all, detailed plans for what they called Phase 3 civilian pacification. The files made it clear that once organized military resistance collapsed, the Korthanian strategy called for the systematic elimination of anyone capable of leadership: teachers, doctors, engineers, local officials, even shopkeepers who might serve as community focal points. It was genocide disguised as military efficiency, and according to the timeline, implementation would begin in less than 2 weeks, but buried within the massive data streams, she found something even more valuable: the complete deployment schedule for Korthanian rapid response units across the northern territories. The information painted a detailed picture of their military capabilities and, more importantly, their vulnerabilities. There were gaps in their coverage, windows of opportunity that could be exploited. If the right intelligence reached Valerian commanders in time, her nanobotic systems worked frantically to copy everything they could access while maintaining the illusion that she was simply attempting to establish communication with imaginary Valerian contacts. The quantum encryption protecting the most sensitive files was formidable, but not impenetrable to technology that could manipulate data at the molecular level. The most crucial discovery came in the form of prisoner transport schedules. Marcus wasn't the only high-value captive being held in the cathedral fortress. They had nearly 30 Valerian intelligence officers, special operations personnel, and senior military commanders scattered throughout the facility's detention levels. The Korthanians were planning to transfer all of them to a maximum security installation in the northern mountains within 72 hours. Once that transfer occurred, any chance of rescue would disappear forever. 6 minutes into her allocated privacy, Proximity alarms began sounding throughout the fortress. Emergency lights bathed the communications center in pulsing red illumination as loudspeakers crackled to life with urgent announcements in Korthanian military code. Through her enhanced hearing, Zara could distinguish multiple alert patterns overlapping perimeter breach. Unauthorized aircraft, possible hostile infiltration, for a terrifying moment. She wondered if her nanobotic infiltration had been detected. If somehow their security systems had identified the quantum-level manipulation of their network architecture. But the alert patterns were wrong for that kind of discovery. This was something else, something happening outside the fortress rather than within it. Dr. Grimthorne burst back into the communications center, his pale face flushed with excitement and alarm. "All communications activities are suspended immediately," he announced, his earlier scientific curiosity replaced by military urgency. "We're implementing emergency protocols. You'll need to return to your quarters until the situation is resolved." "What's happening?" Zara asked, injecting appropriate levels of concern and confusion into her voice, while her enhanced senses strained to gather intelligence about the nature of the emergency. Valerian reconnaissance aircraft have been detected approaching from the southeast, possibly preparing for a rescue attempt. Grimthorne's eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "The timing is remarkably convenient, given your recent arrival." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. If the Korthanians decided she was somehow connected to the approaching threat, her carefully constructed cover would collapse instantly. Worse, if there really was a Valerian rescue operation in progress. Her presence in the fortress could compromise both missions simultaneously. "I don't know anything about aircraft," she said, allowing genuine fear to color her voice. "I told you, I came here alone. I just want my brother back and safe passage out of the war zone. If the Valerian military is planning some kind of attack, we're all in danger." Through the communications center's reinforced windows, she could see searchlights sweeping the sky while anti-aircraft batteries swiveled toward threatening shadows that might or might not be real. The fortress was transitioning to full combat readiness with impressive speed. Blast doors sealing critical sections while armed patrols doubled their coverage of all potential infiltration routes, but Zara's enhanced vision could detect something the Korthanian defenders couldn't: thermal signatures in the surrounding ruins that suggested the aircraft threat was actually a diversion. Someone was using the aerial alert to mask a ground-based infiltration attempt. And they were already inside the fortress's outer perimeter. The realization struck like lightning. Command hadn't trusted her mission to succeed alone. They'd prepared a backup extraction plan, probably triggered by her failure to report in according to predetermined schedules. Somewhere in the cathedral's converted corridors, another Valerian Special Operations team was moving toward the detention levels where Marcus and the other prisoners were being held. If the two operations collided without coordination, both would fail catastrophic. As guards arrived to escort her back to the secure quarters, Zara forced herself to maintain her desperate defector persona while her mind raced through rapidly shifting possibilities. She had perhaps 30 minutes before the approaching rescue team reached the detention levels. 30 minutes to find a way to coordinate their efforts without exposing her own mission or compromising their operational security. The nanobotic network in her bloodstream pulsed with urgent energy, demanding action while her rational mind screamed for caution. Every instinct told her that the next few minutes would determine whether her brother lived or died, whether 30 Valerian prisoners would gain freedom or face execution, and whether the intelligence she'd gathered would ever reach the commanders who desperately needed it. As emergency klaxons wailed throughout the fortress and the sound of running boots echoed through ancient stone corridors, Captain Zara Blackthorne prepared to abandon her cover and become the weapon she'd been designed to be. The escort back to her quarters felt like a funeral march. Two guards flanked her through corridors that buzzed with emergency activity soldiers running to defensive positions. Technicians securing equipment, officers shouting orders in the clipped military dialect that transcended language barriers. Through it all, Zara maintained her cover as the frightened defector. But her enhanced senses were mapping every detail of the fortresses. Emergency response protocols. The revelation hit her as they passed a junction where maintenance corridors intersected with the main prisoner transport routes. The approaching rescue team wasn't just another special operations unit. The thermal signatures she detected were too precise, too coordinated for standard military infiltration. These were Ghost Protocol operatives, the Valerian Republic's most classified asset. Soldiers who'd undergone the same experimental enhancement procedures that had transformed her into a living weapon. Command hadn't just sent backup. They'd deployed their most dangerous assets to ensure the mission's success. Which meant the intelligence she'd discovered about Korthanian genocide plans was even more critical than she'd realized. Someone at the highest levels of government had decided that preventing Phase 3, civilian pacification, was worth risking multiple Ghost Protocol operatives simultaneously. Back in her quarters, Zara settled onto the narrow cot and forced her breathing into the patterns of genuine sleep while her enhanced hearing tracked the fortress's defensive preparations. The guards stationed outside her door were nervous, their elevated heart rates and increased respiration indicating stress levels that could work in her favor. Nervous guards made mistakes, overlooked details, failed to follow protocols with absolute precision. But she also detected something more troubling. Dr. Grimthorne's distinctive biosignature was approaching her quarters, accompanied by what sounded like portable scanning equipment. His earlier suspicions hadn't been forgotten, if anything. The convenient timing of the aerial alert had intensified his concerns about her true identity. The door's electronic lock disengaged with a soft chime, and Grimthorne entered with two technicians carrying devices that made Zara's nanobotic network pulse with alarm. Quantum resonance scanners equipment designed to detect energy signatures at the subatomic level. If they conducted a full spectrum analysis while her enhancements were active, they'd discover technological signatures that had no business existing in a human nervous system. Routine security sweep, Grimthorne announced, his voice carefully neutral. Given the current emergency, we're scanning all areas of the fortress for potential infiltration devices or concealed weapons. Zara sat up slowly, maintaining her facade of groggy confusion while frantically calculating options. The nanobotic network could be temporarily suppressed, but doing so would leave her genuinely helpless if the situation deteriorated rapidly. Alternatively, she could attempt to mislead the scanners by manipulating their quantum resonance patterns, a technique that had worked in laboratory simulations but had never been tested under field conditions. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, injecting the right amount of indignation into her voice. "I've already been searched multiple times. I came here voluntarily to trade information for my brother's safety." One of the technicians activated his scanner, and immediately the device began registering anomalous readings. Zara felt her heart rate spike as quantum energies washed over her enhanced physiology, probing for signatures that shouldn't exist in baseline human biology. The scanner's display showed wave-like patterns that danced, dangerously close to revealing her true nature. But years of training in impossibly high-stress situations came to her rescue. Instead of trying to hide her enhancements, she did something the Korthanians would never expect. She enhanced the scanner's readings in precisely the wrong direction. Her nanobotic network flooded her system with quantum signatures that mimicked severe radiation exposure, the kind of cellular damage that would result from prolonged proximity to military-grade nuclear materials. The scanner began shrieking urgent alarms as its displays registered what appeared to be critical radiation poisoning. Grimthorne and his technicians stared at the readings in shock. Their suspicions about concealed weapons instantly replaced by concerns about contamination and immediate medical emergency. Radiation exposure. Severe acute syndrome, one technician announced, his voice tight with professional alarm. These readings indicate she's been exposed to weapons-grade nuclear materials within the last 72 hours. Grimthorne's face went pale as the implications hit him. The Valerian resistance has been rumored to possess tactical nuclear devices. If she's been in contact with their weapons programs. He stepped back instinctively. Despite knowing that radiation exposure wasn't contagious, Zara allowed weakness to creep into her voice, play into their sudden medical concerns. "I was at the Blackrock facility 3 days ago," she whispered, naming a known Valerian weapons research installation that had been destroyed in Korthanian bombing raids. "There was an accident during the evacuation. I didn't think. I thought I was far enough away from the reactor breach." The lie was perfect because it was partially true. The Blackrock facility had indeed been destroyed, and radiation exposure would explain both her desperation to defect and any unusual readings their equipment might detect. More importantly, it transformed her from a potential security risk into a humanitarian crisis that required immediate medical attention. "Get her to the medical bay immediately," Grimthorne ordered, his earlier suspicions evaporating in the face of apparent radiation sickness. "Dr. Wintermere will need to assess her condition and determine if she poses a contamination risk to other personnel." As they escorted her through corridors that thrummed with emergency activity, Zara's enhanced hearing picked up radio chatter that confirmed her worst fears. The Ghost Protocol team had been detected during their infiltration attempt. 3 operatives were already dead, pinned down in the fortress's eastern section by Korthanian rapid response units. The mission was failing, her backup was compromised, and Marcus remained a prisoner in the tower levels. But the medical bay represented opportunity as well as danger. Healthcare facilities required different security protocols than military detention areas, and radiation contamination concerns would limit the number of personnel willing to maintain close surveillance. More importantly, medical facilities had their own communication systems, separate from the fortress's main network, systems that might provide access to emergency channels. The Korthanians didn't monitor as closely. Dr. Helena Wintermere was a severe woman in her 60s, with the kind of precise movements that spoke of decades spent working in high-pressure medical environments. She examined the scanner readings with professional detachment while her assistants prepared isolation protocols. "Acute radiation syndrome. Stage 3 progression," she announced after reviewing the data. "Cellular degradation is advancing rapidly. Without immediate treatment, she has perhaps 48 hours before organ failure becomes irreversible." The diagnosis was exactly what Zara needed: a medical emergency that would require specialized treatment while providing perfect cover. For the final phase of her mission, radiation sickness would explain any physical weakness, any unusual behavior, any desperate actions she might need to take in the coming hours. But as Dr. Wintermere began preparing treatment protocols, alarms throughout the fortress shifted to a new pattern. The defensive alerts were being replaced by something more urgent: prisoner escape protocols. Through enhanced hearing that cut through multiple layers of concrete and steel, Zara could detect the sounds of combat from the detention levels. The Ghost Protocol team hadn't been completely eliminated. At least one operative had reached the tower where Marcus was being held, and the sound pattern suggested active rescue operations were already in progress, which meant she had minutes, not hours, to coordinate with their efforts or risk catastrophic failure for both missions. As medical personnel bustled around her with radiation detection equipment and emergency treatments, Captain Zara Blackthorne began calculating the precise sequence of actions that would either save 31 Valerian prisoners or result in their immediate execution. The nanobotic network in her bloodstream pulsed with lethal energy. ready to transform her from apparent victim to ultimate predator. But first, she needed to ensure that when she revealed her true nature, the timing would serve the mission rather than compromise it. The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the choice between maintaining her cover and embracing the weapon she'd been designed to become. The medical bay's isolation chamber was a sterile cocoon of white walls and humming equipment, designed to contain radioactive contamination while providing emergency treatment. As Dr. Wintermere's team worked around her with practiced efficiency, Zara felt the irony of her situation. She was surrounded by people desperately trying to save her from a condition that didn't exist, while the real emergency unfolded 3 floors above their heads. The treatment protocols gave her exactly what she needed: legitimate medical justification for elevated stress responses, unpredictable vital signs, and most importantly, a reason to be connected to the fortress's emergency medical network. The radiation monitoring equipment attached to her body provided perfect cover for the nanobotic interfaces she was establishing with the facility's communication systems. Cellular regeneration therapy will need to begin immediately, Dr. Wintermere announced, reviewing treatment options on her tablet. The quantum cellular reconstructor can halt the radiation damage, but the process requires complete neural interface synchronization. We'll need to establish direct connections to her nervous system. Perfect. Zara forced herself to look appropriately terrified at the prospect of invasive medical procedures, while internally celebrating the opportunity. Neural interface connections would provide the deepest possible access to the fortress's systems, allowing her nanobotic network to infiltrate areas that even the most sophisticated hacking attempts couldn't reach. Through the isolation chamber's reinforced windows, she could see increased activity in the medical bay's corridors. Emergency personnel were rushing toward the upper levels, and the pattern of their movements confirmed her worst fears. The Ghost Protocol rescue attempt had triggered a full fortress lockdown, with all prisoners being moved to secure transport positions for immediate evacuation. Marcus and the other captives had perhaps 20 minutes before they'd be loaded onto armored vehicles and transported to the maximum security installation in the northern mountains. Once that happened, no rescue operation would be possible. The mountain facility was impregnable, designed specifically to hold high-value prisoners indefinitely. Dr. Wintermere, she whispered, allowing genuine urgency to color her voice. Before you begin the treatment, I need to tell you something about why I'm really here. The medical team paused their preparations, sudden tension filling the sterile air. Wintermere moved closer to the isolation chamber, her professional demeanor sharpening with suspicion. I'm not just a defector seeking asylum, Zara continued, letting carefully measured amounts of truth bleed into her performance. I'm an intelligence operative. The radiation exposure, it happened during a covert mission to penetrate your weapons research facilities. The information I brought isn't just strategic intelligence, it's proof that your military leaders are planning systematic genocide against civilian populations. The revelation hit the medical staff like a physical blow. Several technicians stepped back instinctively, while others reached for emergency communication devices. But Dr. Wintermere held up a hand, stopping their reactions before they could escalate. Explain, she said simply, her voice carrying decades of experience with life and death decisions. Phase 3, civilian pacification, Zara said, using the exact terminology she'd discovered in the fortress's classified files. Systematic elimination of teachers, doctors, community leaders, anyone capable of organizing resistance or rebuilding after the war. Implementation begins in 12 days, starting with the southern provinces. Wintermere's face went ashen as the implications sank in. As a physician, she'd taken oaths to preserve life, to heal rather than harm. The idea of participating in a military organization planning genocide would violate every principle she devoted her career to upholding. "You're lying," one of the younger technicians said. But his voice carried more hope than conviction. Command would never authorize operations against civilian medical personnel. "Check your own intelligence networks," Zara challenged, meeting Wintermere's troubled gaze. "Cross-reference the deployment schedules you've been receiving with population density maps of the target regions. Look at the resource allocations for units designated as pacification specialists. The evidence is there if you're willing to see it." The medical bay's communication systems crackled to life with urgent announcements. Transport vehicles were being prepared for immediate prisoner evacuation. All medical personnel were to maintain emergency readiness. And most chilling of all, Dr. Wintermere was being summoned to the command center for immediate consultation about enhanced interrogation protocols for high-value intelligence assets. The meaning was unmistakably clear. They were planning to torture the captured prisoners for information before executing them. Wintermere stared at the communication panel for long moments, her internal struggle visible in the tension around her eyes. Finally, she turned back to Zara with the expression of someone making a decision that would define the rest of her life. "The neural interface equipment can be configured for more than medical treatment," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the chamber's life support systems. "If properly calibrated, it could provide access to the fortress's entire communication network. Theoretically, someone with the right training could use it to coordinate rescue operations or transmit intelligence to external sources." It was an offer of alliance disguised as medical consultation. And Zara recognized it immediately. Dr. Wintermere was choosing to believe in the possibility of genocide rather than risk enabling it through inaction. She was offering to help, even though doing so would mark her as a traitor to her own military forces. "The Ghost Protocol team," Zara said, abandoning all pretense of being a simple defector. 3 operatives are pinned down in the eastern section, trying to reach the detention levels. If we can coordinate their movements with a fortress-wide systems failure, they might be able to complete the prisoner extraction. Wintermere nodded grimly, her hands already moving to reconfigure the neural interface equipment. The quantum cellular reconstructor generates massive electromagnetic pulses during operation. If those pulses were properly directed, they could overload critical systems throughout the fortress power grids, security networks, communications arrays. How long would the disruption last? Zara asked, calculating rapidly while nanobotic tendrils began establishing connections with the medical equipment. Perhaps 10 minutes of complete systems failure, followed by another 20 minutes of cascading malfunctions, as backup systems attempt to compensate for the overloads. 30 minutes total, enough time for the Ghost Protocol team to reach the detention levels, extract the prisoners, and escape through routes that would be temporarily unmonitored. But it would also expose Dr. Wintermere and her medical team as active collaborators in the escape attempt. "They'll execute you for this," Zara warned, even as her enhanced systems began interfacing with the fortress's network architecture through the neural connections Wintermere was establishing. "Perhaps," the doctor replied with calm resignation. "But I became a physician to save lives, not to enable their systematic destruction. If your intelligence about genocide planning is accurate, then helping you escape serves a greater good than preserving my own safety." As the neural interface activated, Zara felt her consciousness expand beyond her physical body, flowing through fiber optic cables and quantum communication channels that connected every system in the fortress. For the first time since her mission began, she had complete access to the Korthanian installation's most critical functions: power distribution, security protocols, prisoner transport schedules, even the personal communication devices carried by every soldier in the compound. Through the network, She could sense the Ghost Protocol operatives' precise locations, their dwindling ammunition supplies, their desperate attempts to reach Marcus and the other prisoners before the transport vehicles arrived. She could also detect Commander Darkwater's growing suspicion about the convenient timing of multiple security breaches occurring simultaneously. Most importantly, she could see the real scope of the Korthanian military operation, the true scale of their genocide planning, the timeline for implementation, and the identity of civilian targets already marked for elimination. The intelligence was staggering in its implications and absolutely critical for Valerian strategic planning. But accessing all of this information had triggered quantum security protocols that were rapidly zeroing in on her location. Within minutes, the fortress's automated defense systems would identify the medical bay as the source of the network intrusion and respond with lethal force. As electromagnetic energy built toward the massive pulse that would cripple the fortress's systems, Captain Zara Blackthorne prepared to abandon her cover completely and become the weapon she'd been designed to be. The point of no return had arrived, and with it, the moment when stealth would give way to open warfare. The mission's final phase was about to begin. The electromagnetic pulse erupted through the fortress like digital lightning, cascading through every circuit, every processor, every quantum communication array in a wave of systematic destruction. Emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging corridors into darkness broken only by the eerie glow of backup power systems struggling to compensate for catastrophic overloads. Zara felt the pulse through her nanobotic network like a symphony of chaos, security doors unlocking throughout the facility, surveillance systems going blind, communication networks fragmenting into useless static. But the sensation came at a cost that made her entire body convulse with agony. The neural interface connections that had given her access to the fortress's systems were never designed to channel the kind of quantum energies her enhancements could generate. Neural feedback is spiking beyond safe parameters, Dr. Wintermere announced, her voice tight with professional concern as medical monitors shrieked urgent warnings. We need to disconnect the interface before permanent brain damage occurs. Not yet, Zara gasped, fighting to maintain consciousness while her enhanced systems coordinated with the Ghost Protocol operatives through the fortress's failing network. Through fractured communication channels, she could sense their positions shifting rapidly through corridors that no longer had active security monitoring. The prisoners were being moved according to corridors that no longer had active security monitoring. The prisoners were being moved according to emergency evacuation protocols, loaded onto armored transports in the fortress's underground motor pool. Marcus was among them, his biosignature weak but stable as Korthanian guards, prepared to transfer him to the northern mountains, where rescue would be impossible. But the system failures had created opportunities that the Ghost Protocol team was already exploiting. Blast doors that should have sealed automatically during security breaches remained locked in open positions. Surveillance networks that should have tracked every movement through the facility were completely blind. Guard rotations that relied on electronic coordination were falling apart as communication systems failed catastrophically. Transport convoy departing in 4 minutes, came the fragmented report through her neural link. Eastern team engaging escort vehicles. Western team has breached detention level 7, requesting immediate coordination for prisoner extraction. Zara forced her consciousness deeper into the fortress's network architecture, using her nanobotic enhancements to maintain connections that should have been severed by the electromagnetic cascade. Every second of continued interface sent spikes of neural feedback through her enhanced physiology. But she could see the complete tactical picture: guard positions, prisoner locations, vehicle routes, and most critically, the narrow window of opportunity that existed for successful extraction. "Dr. Wintermere," she whispered through gritted teeth, "I need you to trigger a medical emergency alert for the motor pool. Something that will require immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel." The physician's hands moved swiftly across her control panels, initiating protocols that would flood the underground parking area with warnings about toxic gas leaks, radiation exposure, or chemical contamination, anything that would clear civilians and support staff from the area where the final confrontation would occur. Through the failing surveillance network, Zara watched the Ghost Protocol operatives move with lethal precision through corridors that should have been impregnable. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were enhanced humans like herself, their capabilities amplified by experimental technologies that pushed the boundaries of human potential. She could sense their nanobotic signatures through the quantum interference, recognizing the distinctive energy patterns of Ghost Protocol enhancements. The lead operative, designated Spectre 7 according to her tactical display, was already engaging Korthanian forces near the motor pool entrance. His movement patterns suggested adaptive camouflage capabilities similar to her own, allowing him to appear and disappear like smoke, while eliminating sentries with surgical precision. But the fortress's command structure was adapting faster than expected. Commander Darkwater's voice crackled through emergency communication channels, issuing orders that demonstrated tactical brilliance under impossible circumstances. Instead of trying to restore failed systems, he was coordinating manual responses, human intelligence networks, visual communication protocols, defensive positions that didn't rely on electronic coordination. "All units converge on motor pool level," his voice commanded through backup radio networks. "Prisoner transport is priority 1. Eliminate all unauthorized personnel on site. Authorization code Crimson 7 lethal force approved for all targets." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Even with their enhanced capabilities, 3 Ghost Protocol operatives couldn't fight through an entire fortress of elite Korthanian soldiers. They needed more than tactical coordination. They needed the kind of devastating distraction that only a fully operational Ghost Protocol asset could provide. Zara made the decision that transformed her from covert operative to active combatant. With a surge of nanobotic energy that sent every medical monitor in the isolation chamber into critical alarm status, she severed her connections to the fortress's network and began the process of activating her combat enhancement protocols. The transformation was unlike anything Dr. Wintermere had ever witnessed. The woman who had appeared to be dying of radiation poisoning suddenly radiated an energy that made the air itself seem to thrum with potential violence. Her skin took on an almost translucent quality as nanobotic enhancement systems optimized her physiology for maximum combat effectiveness. "What are you?" Wintermere whispered, professional fascination warring with instinctive fear. "I'm what happens when science decides to build the perfect weapon," Zara replied, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate at frequencies just beyond human hearing. "Project Ghost Protocol Nanobotic Enhancement, Adaptive Camouflage, Quantum-Level Combat Optimization." She stood from the medical table with movements that seemed to flow like liquid mercury, every gesture perfectly calculated for maximum efficiency. The isolation chamber's reinforced walls might as well have been tissue paper too. Someone whose enhanced strength could shatter steel with casual effort. "The prisoners in Transport 7 include my brother," she said, her tone shifting to something that promised absolute destruction to anyone who stood in her way. "That convoy will not reach the northern mountains. The question is whether you want to help ensure minimal casualties during the extraction, or whether you want to stay here and try to explain to Commander Darkwater why your medical bay was the source of the electromagnetic pulse that crippled his fortress." Dr. Wintermere looked at the medical readings scattered across her displays. Impossible physiological parameters. Energy signatures that defied every law of biology she understood. Vital signs that indicated capabilities far beyond baseline human limits. Then she looked at the woman standing before her, no longer playing the role of desperate defector, but revealing herself as something that existed at the intersection of science and nightmare. "What do you need from me?" she asked simply. "Access to the fortress's emergency medical transport," Zara replied, her enhanced vision already tracking the heat signatures of approaching Korthanian reinforcements. "Something fast enough to reach the motor pool before the convoy departs, armored enough to survive concentrated weapons fire, and equipped with communication systems that can coordinate with the Ghost Protocol extraction team." As alarms continued to wail throughout the fortress and the sounds of combat echoed from the detention levels, Dr. Helena Wintermere made the final choice that would define her legacy. She chose to enable the perfect weapon rather than stand by while genocide unfolded across the continent. The battle for the fortress had begun, and Captain Zara Blackthorne was no longer hiding what she was capable of becoming. The emergency medical transport was an armored hovercraft designed for battlefield casualty evacuation, sleek, fast, and equipped with enough defensive systems to survive passage through active combat zones. Dr. Wintermere's medical authorization codes granted them immediate access. Though Zara could see the confusion in the hangar technicians' faces as they prepared a radiation-contaminated patient for what appeared to be a suicide mission into the fortress's most dangerous areas. "Quantum shielding is online. Propulsion systems show green across all indicators," the lead technician reported, his voice carrying the professional calm of someone who'd learned not to question emergency medical protocols during active combat situations. "Flight time to motor pool entrance is approximately 90 seconds at maximum velocity." Zara settled into the pilot's position with movements that seemed almost supernatural in their precision. Her nanobotic enhancements interfaced directly with the transport's control systems, creating a neural link that allowed her to operate the vehicle as an extension of her own enhanced reflexes. Through the craft's sensor arrays, she could perceive the fortress around them in ways that transcended normal human limitations. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Ghost Protocol Spectre 7 had successfully breached the motor pool's outer defenses, but Korthanian reinforcements were converging from 3 directions simultaneously. The prisoner transport convoy was preparing for immediate departure, with Marcus and 29 other high-value captives loaded into armored vehicles that could withstand conventional weapons fire. More critically, Commander Darkwater had apparently realized that the electromagnetic pulse hadn't been caused by equipment failure or external attack. It had originated from within the fortress itself, suggesting the presence of technology that shouldn't exist in Korthanian space. His tactical responses were shifting accordingly, with specialized units being deployed to hunt for infiltrators using capabilities beyond standard military enhancement. Launching in 30 seconds, Zara announced through the transport's communication system, her enhanced hearing detecting the approach of vehicles that would attempt to prevent their departure. "Dr. Wintermere, I need you to broadcast medical emergency codes on all frequencies, something that will require the convoy to halt for safety protocols." The physician's fingers flew across her communication panel, initiating alerts about catastrophic radiation leaks, toxic gas dispersal, and biological contamination threats that would trigger mandatory isolation procedures for any military vehicles in the affected area. The false emergency signals wouldn't delay the convoy for long, but they might provide the crucial minutes needed for the Ghost Protocol extraction team to complete their mission. That the transport launched with acceleration that would have been fatal to unenhanced humans, rocketing through the fortress's internal transit tunnels at velocities that turned the ancient stone corridors into blurred streaks of shadow and emergency lighting. Zara's nanobotic reflexes compensated for gravitational forces that should have rendered her unconscious, while her enhanced vision tracked potential threats through walls and barriers that would have blocked normal human perception. 60 seconds into their flight, proximity alarms began shrieking as Korthanian defense systems locked onto their signature. Anti-aircraft batteries that had been positioned to repel external attacks swiveled inward, targeting what their automated systems identified as a hostile aircraft operating within the fortress's secure perimeter. "Incoming missile lock," Dr. Wintermere announced, her voice remarkably steady for someone experiencing her first taste of aerial combat. Multiple targeting solutions detected. Zara's response was to push the transport's propulsion systems beyond their rated specifications, using nanobotic interfaces to optimize engine performance in ways that the craft's designers had never intended. They corkscrewed through a maze of structural supports and defensive barriers, their flight path so erratic and unpredictable that the fortress's automated targeting systems couldn't maintain consistent firing solutions. But the Korthanian defenses adapted quickly. Instead of relying on guided missiles, they began filling the transport tunnels with overlapping fields of energy weapon fire particle beams and plasma bursts that created a web of destruction through which no conventional aircraft could survive. Passage, the solution required abandoning every safety protocol the transport had been designed with. Zara activated the craft's emergency medical shielding quantum barriers intended to protect critically injured patients from external electromagnetic interference. But instead of using them defensively, she configured the shields to create a localized space-time distortion field that bent incoming energy attacks around their flight path. The effect was spectacular and terrifying. Energy beams that should have vaporized the transport instead curved around them like light bending around a black hole, while their passage left trails of quantum distortion that made the ancient stone corridors appear to ripple like water. Physics itself seemed to bend to accommodate their impossible flight path. "Motor pool entrance in 15 seconds," Zara announced as they approached the underground parking facility where the prisoner convoy was preparing to depart. Through the transport sensors, she could detect the heat signatures of at least 40 Korthanian soldiers positioned to defend the convoy route, along with the distinctive energy patterns that indicated Ghost Protocol. Spectre 7 was already engaged in active combat. The Ghost Protocol operative was magnificent in action. A blur of adaptive camouflage and enhanced reflexes that moved through enemy positions like death incarnate. But even enhanced humans had limitations, and he was facing odds that would eventually overwhelm any individual combatant. Regardless of their capabilities, the prisoner transport vehicles were already moving, their armored hulls reflecting emergency lighting as they accelerated toward exit ramps that would take them beyond any hope of rescue. Marcus was in the second vehicle, his biosignature weak but stable among the 30 captives who represented the Valerian Republic's best hope for intelligence about Korthanian strategic planning. Zara made the decision that would define the mission's outcome. Instead of attempting a conventional rescue approach, she aimed a medical transport directly at the convoy's lead vehicle and activated every offensive system the craft possessed. Medical evacuation vehicles weren't designed for combat, but they carried enough defensive weaponry to clear landing zones in hostile territory. Dr. Wintermere, emergency medical protocols authorize the use of lethal force to protect patients under our care, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with quantum frequencies. "I'm officially declaring all prisoners in that convoy to be under our medical protection." The transport's weapon systems came online with a whine of charging energy cells. Particle cannons designed for clearing debris from landing sites swiveled to target the convoy's escort vehicles, while defensive barriers reconfigured to provide maximum protection for the imminent collision. As they descended toward the motor pool in a controlled crash that would either rescue 31 prisoners or result in everyone's immediate death. Captain Zara Blackthorne felt the nanobotic network in her bloodstream surge, with combat optimization protocols that pushed her enhanced physiology to its absolute limits. The final battle for the fortress was about to begin, and she was no longer pretending to be anything other than the perfect weapon she'd been designed to become. The medical transport hit the convoy's lead vehicle with the force of a controlled meteorite strike. Armored plating designed to withstand conventional weapons fire crumpled like paper as quantum-enhanced momentum transferred through reinforced chassis structures, sending the escort vehicle tumbling across the motor pool in a cascade of sparks and twisted metal. Zara's nanobotic enhancements absorbed impact forces that would have liquefied an unenhanced human. But even her enhanced physiology had limits. She felt ribs crack and neural pathways overload as the transport's emergency systems fought to keep both occupants alive through a collision that violated every principle of safe medical evacuation procedures. The prisoner convoy's remaining vehicles immediately shifted into defensive formation, their automated systems responding to the attack with overlapping fields of weapons fire that turned the motor pool into a hellscape of energy beams and explosive projectiles. But the Korthanian response protocols were designed for external threats, not for medical transports operating under emergency authorization, codes that granted them access to areas no hostile force should have been able to reach. Dr. Wintermere's emergency medical broadcasts were still flooding all communication frequencies, creating enough confusion among the convoy's automated systems that their targeting solutions kept shifting between threat assessment and medical assistance protocols. The vehicle's artificial intelligence networks couldn't reconcile the conflicting data. A medical evacuation craft that was simultaneously attacking them and broadcasting legitimate emergency medical codes. Through the transport's cracked viewport, Zara could see Ghost Protocol Spectre 7 moving like liquid death through the Korthanian defensive positions. His adaptive camouflage made him nearly impossible to track, appearing as brief distortions in the air before materializing long enough to eliminate enemy soldiers with surgical precision. But the convoy's departure schedule meant they had perhaps 90 seconds before the prisoner vehicles escaped through exit ramps that would take them beyond the fortress's perimeter. Zara forced herself upright despite the symphony of pain from her impact injuries, her enhanced healing systems already working to repair damaged tissues, while her consciousness interfaced with the transport's failing systems. The crash had destroyed most of their mobility, but the craft's defensive barriers were still operational, and more importantly, its communication arrays could reach the Ghost Protocol Coordination Network. Spectre 7. This is Ghost Prime, she transmitted on frequencies that existed at the quantum level, below the threshold of Korthanian detection capabilities. Prisoner Transport Vehicle 2 contains primary objective Marcus Blackthorne. Recommend immediate extraction before convoy reaches surface level. The response came as a burst of tactical data that painted a complete picture of the motor pool's defensive situation. Spectre 7 had neutralized 12 enemy combatants, but reinforcements were approaching from 3 directions simultaneously. The convoy's escort vehicles were equipped with energy shields that could deflect small arms fire, and their departure route was covered by automated defense turrets that would activate if the vehicle's progress was significantly delayed. More critically, Commander Darkwater himself was approaching with a specialized response team equipped to deal with enhanced human threats. Intelligence suggested they carried weapons designed specifically to disrupt nanobotic enhancement systems technology that could permanently disable or destroy Ghost Protocol operatives. Dr. Wintermere, Zara said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate at frequencies beyond normal human hearing. The transport's medical systems, can they be reconfigured to generate a localized electromagnetic pulse? The physician stared at her instruments with the expression of someone being asked to violate every principle of medical ethics she'd ever learned. The quantum cellular reconstructor generates massive energy spikes during calibration sequences. If those spikes were directed outward instead of being contained within the treatment chamber, it would disable every electronic system in a 30-meter radius, Zara finished, calculating trajectories while her enhanced vision tracked the convoy's movements, including the escort vehicle's defensive shields and automated weapons systems. It would also likely kill anyone with cybernetic implants or cardiac pacemakers within the affected area, Wintermere warned, her professional conscience warring with the desperate tactical situation. The electromagnetic cascade would be indiscriminate. Zara's enhanced hearing detected the approach of Commander Darkwater's specialized response. Team soldiers whose biosignatures indicated extensive cybernetic enhancement, making them faster and stronger than baseline humans, but also vulnerable to the kind of electromagnetic disruption she was proposing. Casualties of war, she said with the cold pragmatism of someone who'd learned that perfect solutions didn't exist in combat situations. Those soldiers chose to serve a regime planning systematic genocide. The prisoners in those vehicles are innocent victims who deserve the chance to warn their people about what's coming. The moral calculus was brutal, but undeniable. 31 Valerian intelligence officers and special operations personnel possessed information that could save thousands of civilian lives by exposing the Korthanian genocide plans. Their rescue justified almost any level of collateral damage among enemy forces. Dr. Wintermere's hands moved across her control panels with the precision of someone making a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Electromagnetic pulse will initiate in 30 seconds. Recommend immediate evacuation of the affected area by all personnel not equipped with nanobotic shielding. Zara transmitted the warning to Ghost Protocol Spectre 7 while simultaneously activating her own electromagnetic defenses. Her nanobotic network reconfigured itself to create localized Faraday cage effects, protecting her enhanced systems from the coming pulse while optimizing her physiology for maximum combat effectiveness in the chaos that would follow. The countdown reached 0 with surgical precision. Electromagnetic pulse erupted outward from the damaged medical transport like invisible lightning, cascading through every electronic system in the motor pool with devastating effect. Vehicle engines died instantly, their quantum processors fried beyond repair. Defensive shields collapsed as their power sources overloaded. Emergency lighting failed, plunging the underground facility into darkness broken only by the sparks of cascading system failures. But the pulse's most dramatic effect was on Commander Darkwater's cybernetically enhanced response team. Soldiers who had been moving with superhuman speed and coordination suddenly collapsed as their implants fried, their enhanced reflexes and artificial strength systems rendered useless by electromagnetic overload. In the darkness that followed, Ghost Protocol Spectre 7 moved like a force of nature given physical form. His adaptive camouflage made him invisible to human perception, while his enhanced strength allowed him to tear through the convoy's armored vehicles as if they were constructed from cardboard. Within minutes, 31 Valerian prisoners were being extracted from disabled transport vehicles and guided toward escape routes that the electromagnetic pulse had left unmonitored. Zara found Marcus in the second vehicle, unconscious but alive, his breathing shallow but steady despite weeks of captivity. The reunion was everything she'd dreamed of and nothing she'd expected. Her brother was barely recognizable, weakened by imprisonment, but still possessing the stubborn resilience that had carried him through their childhood in war-torn territories. "Zara?" he whispered, his voice barely audible as she carried him toward the extraction point. How are you here?" "I became something new," she replied, her enhanced physiology allowing her to move through the devastated motor pool while carrying his weight without difficulty. Something that could reach you no matter where they tried to hide you. But their escape route was already compromised. Through her enhanced hearing, Zara could detect the approach of additional Korthanian forces units that had been held in reserve specifically for situations like this. Soldiers equipped with technology designed to hunt enhanced humans in environments where conventional electronics had failed. The fortress's real security didn't depend on automated systems or cybernetic enhancements. It relied on human intelligence, tactical experience, and the kind of weapons that functioned independently of electronic support. Commander Darkwater, despite the failure of his cybernetic implants, was coordinating a response that would soon turn their temporary victory into a death trap. As she carried Marcus toward freedom through corridors that echoed with the sounds of systematic pursuit, Captain Zara Blackthorne realized that the most dangerous phase of their escape was just beginning. The escape route through the cathedral's ancient maintenance tunnels felt like descending into the bowels of hell itself. Emergency lighting had failed throughout the fortress, leaving only the eerie phosphorescent glow of nanobotic enhancement systems to illuminate passages that hadn't seen regular use in centuries. Zara's enhanced vision cut through the darkness like a blade, revealing structural details that told the story of a building that had been converted from place of worship to instrument of war. Marcus's weight against her shoulder was both burden and blessing, proof that her mission hadn't been in vain, but also a constant reminder that their escape depended entirely on maintaining a pace that his weakened condition could barely sustain. Behind them, the sounds of systematic pursuit echoed through stone corridors, a methodical hunting pattern that spoke of professional soldiers who understood how to track enhanced humans through environments where technology couldn't assist them. "Zara," Marcus whispered, his voice carrying the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of interrogation and deprivation. "The things they made me tell them. Strategic positions, communication codes, personnel assignments. They know everything about our northern defensive positions." The intelligence revelation hit like a physical blow. If the Korthanian forces possessed detailed information about Valerian military deployments, the genocide timeline could be accelerated significantly. Phase 3, civilian pacification, might begin in days rather than weeks, with coordinated strikes against population centers that had been stripped of their military protection. "How much did they extract?" she asked, calculating rapidly while her enhanced hearing tracked the pursuit team's approach through parallel tunnel systems. "Everything," Marcus replied, the single word carrying depths of shame and self-recrimination that no amount of tactical understanding could ease. "They had drugs, neural interface technology, enhancement procedures I've never seen before. After the first week, I couldn't distinguish between reality and hallucination. I told them things I didn't even remember knowing." Ghost Protocol Spectre 7 materialized from the shadows ahead, his adaptive camouflage dropping as he established visual contact with their escape group. The other prisoners followed in a ragged line: senior intelligence officers, special operations personnel, communication specialists who collectively represented decades of military experience and classified knowledge that the Korthanian forces had systematically extracted over months of captivity. "Extraction point compromised," Spectre 7 reported, his voice carrying the mechanical precision of someone operating under extreme stress. "Surface teams detected our exit route. Recommend alternative egress through the cathedral's original crypt system." The crypt system represented their best hope and greatest risk simultaneously. The ancient burial chambers beneath the cathedral connected to natural cave networks that extended for kilometers underground, providing multiple escape routes that would be impossible for conventional forces to monitor effectively. But the same passages that offered freedom also contained structural hazards, underground water systems, and air quality issues that could prove fatal to prisoners already weakened by prolonged captivity. How many of the extracted prisoners can handle extended underground movement? Zara asked, her enhanced vision assessing the physical condition of each rescued operative while her tactical analysis systems calculated survival. Probabilities. 17 are mobile with assistance, Spectre 7 replied. 8 require immediate medical attention. 6 are unconscious but stable. The remainder. He paused, the silence speaking volumes about casualties that even enhanced human rescue capabilities couldn't prevent. The arithmetic was brutal, but unavoidable. 31 prisoners had been in the convoy, but not all of them had survived the extraction process or possessed the physical capacity for the kind of underground escape their situation demanded. The mission's success would be measured not in perfect results, but in how many valuable intelligence assets could be preserved for future operations against Korthanian genocide planning. Dr. Wintermere, Zara said, activating communication protocols that connected her to the medical officer who had remained with the disabled transport. We need emergency medical supplies configured for underground operations. Stimulants, oxygen supplements, anything that can sustain weakened personnel through extended physical stress. The response came as a data burst transmitted through quantum frequencies that the Korthanian forces couldn't monitor. Medical supply caches had been positioned throughout the fortress's lower levels, placed there by resistance operatives who had anticipated the need for emergency evacuation scenarios. The information provided coordinates for supply points along their planned escape route, but the pursuit teams were adapting faster than expected. Through her enhanced hearing, Zara could detect the distinctive acoustic signatures of soldiers, using sound-based tracking technology, equipment that could follow their movements through stone corridors by analyzing echoes, breathing patterns, and the subtle vibrations created by enhanced human movement. Commander, Darkwater's tactical response was evolving beyond conventional military doctrine. Instead of trying to recapture the escaped prisoners, he was positioning his forces to prevent their intelligence from reaching Valerian command structures. The pursuit wasn't about recovering assets, it was about ensuring that information about Korthanian genocide planning never reached the people who could organize effective resistance. They're not trying to take us alive, Marcus observed, his tactical training allowing him to recognize the shift in enemy behavior despite his weakened condition. This is an elimination operation disguised as prisoner recovery. The realization changed everything about their escape strategy. If survival rather than capture was the primary concern, they could employ methods that would have been unthinkable in conventional rescue scenarios. Enhanced humans operating without regard for prisoner safety. Protocols represented a level of destructive capability that few military forces were prepared to counter. Zara made the decision that would define the final phase of their escape. Instead of continuing to flee through underground passages, hoping to outlast pursuit teams that could track them indefinitely, she would turn the hunted into hunters. The nanobotic enhancement systems in her bloodstream could support combat operations that exceeded anything the Korthanian forces had experienced, even during their encounters with enhanced human infiltrators. Spectre 7. Escort the prisoners to the crypt system to extraction point Delta 7, she commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate at quantum frequencies. Maintain communication protocols, but prioritize speed over stealth. I'm going to provide rear guard action that will eliminate pursuit capabilities permanently. The Ghost Protocol operative studied her with the kind of professional assessment that came from years of operating with enhanced human assets. Rearguard action against an entire fortress garrison represents unacceptable risk to primary mission objectives. Recommend continued evasion rather than direct engagement. Continued evasion leads to eventual capture or elimination. Zara replied, her enhanced physiology already beginning the process of optimizing for maximum combat effectiveness. Direct engagement eliminates the pursuit and ensures prisoner intelligence reaches Valerian command. The genocide timeline depends on information these prisoners possess reaching people who can act on it. Marcus gripped her arm with what little strength he possessed, his eyes reflecting the kind of desperate love that existed between siblings who had survived too many wars together. Zara, don't do this. We can escape together. We can find another way. She met his gaze with the calm certainty of someone who had calculated all possible outcomes and chosen the path that served the greater good. I didn't become this to run from fights that need to be won, she said softly. I became this to ensure that people like you survive to warn others about what's coming. As the sounds of pursuit grew closer and the weight of impossible choices pressed against her enhanced consciousness, Captain Zara Blackthorne prepared to become something that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare, weapon that could ensure 30 intelligence officers reached safety. Even if it meant sacrificing everything else she had ever been, the transformation from covert operative to active weapon system was unlike anything the ancient cathedral had witnessed in its 1,000 years of existence. As Zara's nanobotic enhancements shifted into full combat optimization, her entire physiology reconfigured itself for maximum lethality. Muscle density increased exponentially. Neural processing accelerated beyond baseline human limitations, and her adaptive camouflage systems prepared to make her invisible to both human perception and technological detection. Pursuit teams approaching through the maintenance tunnels had no comprehension of what they were walking into. Their thermal imaging equipment detected what appeared to be a single fleeing prisoner, moving with the erratic patterns of someone weakened by injury and desperation. Their tactical communications indicated confidence about cornering their quarry within minutes, ending the embarrassing security breach that had allowed 31 high-value prisoners to escape from an allegedly impregnable fortress. They had no idea they were approaching a predator that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Zara positioned herself at a tunnel junction where 3 passages converged, creating a natural choke point that would force the Korthanian soldiers to approach through predictable routes. Her enhanced vision could detect their heat signatures through solid stone, tracking their movements with precision that bordered on precognition. 12 soldiers in the primary pursuit team, 8 more approaching from parallel tunnels, and 4 technical specialists following with portable scanning equipment. The first contact came sooner than expected. A Korthanian scout, moving with the cautious professionalism of someone who understood they were hunting enhanced humans, rounded the corner with weapons raised and scanning protocols active. His equipment detected nothing. Zara's adaptive camouflage rendered her completely invisible to his perception while she stood less than 2 meters away, close enough to count his heartbeats. The scout's death was instantaneous and silent. Nanobotic tendrils extended from her fingertips, making contact with his nervous system and delivering electromagnetic pulses that shut down brain function before he could react or raise an alarm. His body simply stopped functioning, as if someone had disconnected a machine's power supply. But the scout's failure to report his position triggered automatic protocols among the pursuit team. Instead of continuing their methodical advance, they shifted to rapid assault formation, flooding the tunnel junction with overlapping fields of weapons fire that would eliminate any conventional threat through sheer volume of destruction. The energy beams and projectile weapons passed through space where Zara had been standing moments before, their targeting systems unable to track someone who could manipulate light itself to remain invisible. She moved through the storm of weapons fire like smoke, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate between energy beams with margins of safety measured in millimeters. Her counterattack was a symphony of perfectly orchestrated destruction. Each soldier fell to attacks they never saw coming, neural systems disrupted by electromagnetic pulses, weapons disabled by nanobotic infiltration of their firing mechanisms, armor penetrated by molecular manipulation that turned protective equipment into instruments of their own demise. The engagement lasted less than 90 seconds, but when it ended, 24 elite Korthanian soldiers had been eliminated, without managing to inflict a single casualty on their target. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the brief, violent confrontation had been. Through her enhanced hearing, Zara could detect the approach of additional forces, larger units equipped with heavy weapons and technological countermeasures designed specifically for enhanced human threats. Commander Darkwater was escalating his response beyond conventional military doctrine, but the pause in combat also allowed her to confirm what she most needed to know. Ghost Protocol Spectre 7's communication signals indicated successful evacuation of all surviving prisoners through the crypt system. Marcus and the other intelligence officers were beyond the fortress's perimeter, carrying information that could expose Korthanian genocide planning to the world. The mission's primary objective had been achieved. Everything that followed was simply a matter of personal survival versus strategic impact. The next wave of attackers arrived with equipment that changed the tactical situation fundamentally. Instead of conventional soldiers, they were combat specialists equipped with quantum disruptor weapons technology designed to interfere with nanobotic enhancement systems at the molecular level. Their approach was coordinated and methodical, with overlapping fields of quantum interference that would neutralize enhanced human capabilities within a defined area. For the first time since her enhancement procedures, Zara felt genuinely vulnerable. The quantum disruptors created zones where her adaptive camouflage failed, where her enhanced strength diminished, where the nanobotic network that gave her superhuman capabilities began to malfunction in ways that could prove permanently damaging. But vulnerability wasn't the same as helplessness. The enhancement procedures that had created Ghost Protocol operatives included fail-safe systems, specifically designed for situations where nanobotic functions were compromised. Instead of relying on technological advantages, she could draw upon training that pushed baseline human capabilities to their absolute limits. The engagement that followed was brutal and desperate, a confrontation between enhanced technology and pure human determination that tested every skill she had learned during years of special operations training. Without her nanobotic advantages, she was forced to rely on conventional weapons, tactical positioning, and the kind of ruthless efficiency that came from understanding that failure meant not just death, but the success of genocide plans that would eliminate millions of innocent civilians. She fought through the fortress's lower levels like someone possessed, using every structural feature, every shadow, every weakness in their tactical formation to maintain the initiative against overwhelming odds. The Korthanian soldiers were professionals, but they were accustomed to technological superiority, providing decisive advantages. When faced with an opponent who could match their training while operating under impossible constraints, their tactical doctrine proved inadequate. The running battle carried them through corridors that hadn't seen combat since the cathedral's construction centuries earlier, past chambers where ancient religious artifacts shared space with modern military equipment. Each engagement forced the Korthanian forces to choose between pursuing a single target and maintaining defensive positions that protected critical fortress functions, but the quantum disruptor fields were taking their toll. Zara could feel her nanobotic systems deteriorating under constant interference, critical functions failing as the molecular machinery that gave her enhanced capabilities suffered irreversible damage. Soon, she would be reduced to purely baseline human capabilities, still formidable given her training, but insufficient against the forces arrayed against her. The final confrontation came in the cathedral's main sanctuary, where Commander Darkwater had positioned himself with the remainder of his elite forces. The massive chamber, with its soaring Gothic arches and ancient stonework, had been converted into a command center bristling with military, technology and defensive positions that commanded every approach. Darkwater himself stood at the altar, no longer the cybernetically enhanced officer she had first encountered, but still possessing the tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness that had made him one of the Korthanian military's most feared commanders. His storm-gray eyes tracked her approach with the intensity of a predator recognizing a worthy opponent. "Captain Zara Blackthorne," he said, his cultured voice echoing through the vast space. "Ghost Protocol operative, nanobotic enhancement specialist, and according to our intelligence files, officially dead for the past 6 months. Your presence here raises fascinating questions about Valerian military capabilities." The quantum disruptor fields in the sanctuary were stronger than anything she had previously encountered, reducing her nanobotic functions to barely detectable levels. She was essentially human again, facing 15 professional soldiers in a defensive position that offered no realistic hope of victory. But as she stepped into the sanctuary's central aisle, walking toward a confrontation that would likely end in her death, Captain Zara Blackthorne felt something she hadn't experienced since her enhancement procedures began: the pure, undiluted satisfaction of a mission accomplished despite impossible odds. Marcus was safe. The prisoners were free. The intelligence about genocide planning would reach people who could act on it. Everything else was just the final chapter of a story that had already achieved its purpose. The Cathedral Sanctuary became a stage for the final act of a drama that had transformed an ancient place of worship into a battlefield where technology and human will would determine the fate of millions. Zara walked down the central aisle with the measured pace of someone who had already calculated all possible outcomes and chosen to face them with dignity rather than desperation. "Commander." Darkwater's defensive position was tactically perfect: elevated terrain, overlapping fields of fire, multiple escape routes, and quantum disruptor arrays that neutralized any advantage her enhancement systems might have provided. His soldiers were positioned with the precision of chess pieces, each covering angles that would prevent any conventional assault from succeeding. "Your mission was remarkably successful," Darkwater continued, his voice carrying genuine professional respect despite the circumstances. 31 high-value prisoners extracted from a fortress that was supposed to be impregnable. Intelligence networks compromised, security protocols shattered, and operational plans exposed to enemy analysis. From a purely tactical perspective, it represents one of the most sophisticated special operations achievements I've encountered. Zara paused at the sanctuary center, directly beneath the soaring arches where religious ceremonies had once celebrated human connections to the divine. Now, the same space would witness a confrontation between two philosophies of warfare: one that valued individual lives above strategic objectives, and another that prioritized victory regardless of moral cost. "The intelligence your prisoners carried has already been transmitted to Valerian command structures," she replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had accomplished what they set out to achieve. "Phase 3, civilian pacification, will face organized resistance. Your genocide timeline has been compromised beyond recovery." Darkwater's expression shifted slightly, storm-gray eyes reflecting calculations that went beyond immediate tactical concerns. "Perhaps, but strategic plans can be adjusted, timelines accelerated, methodologies refined. The fundamental objective remains unchanged: Korthanian control of the continental territories requires elimination of resistance capabilities at all levels, including civilian population centers that might serve as coordination points." The confirmation was exactly what Zara had hoped to provoke. Even under these circumstances, Darkwater's professional pride compelled him to defend his strategic planning. Providing additional intelligence about Korthanian intentions that would be invaluable if it somehow reached Valerian analysts. "Your nanobotic enhancement systems are failing," he observed, studying her with the clinical interest of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. "Quantum disruptor exposure has degraded cellular cohesion to approximately 15% of optimal function. Within another hour, the molecular damage will become irreversible. You're essentially human again." It was true. Zara could feel the nanobotic network in her bloodstream fragmenting under constant quantum interference. Critical systems shutting down as the artificial enhancement machinery that had made her superhuman suffered catastrophic failure. Soon, she would be reduced to baseline human capabilities, still formidable given her training, but insufficient against 15 professional soldiers in prepared positions. But the degradation of her enhancement systems had also freed her from certain constraints that Ghost Protocol operations imposed. The nanobotic network's primary function wasn't just enhancement, it was also monitoring, ensuring that enhanced operatives remained psychologically stable and operationally reliable. As those systems failed, she felt something awakening that had been suppressed since her transformation began: pure human intuition, unfiltered by technological analysis or strategic calculation. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ancient stonework. "You're a professional soldier. You understand tactical excellence when you encounter it. But you're also serving a regime that plans systematic genocide against civilian populations. How do you reconcile professional competence with moral complicity?" The question struck something deeper than tactical considerations. For just a moment, Darkwater's composure cracked, revealing the internal conflict of someone whose military excellence was being used to enable atrocities that violated every principle of honorable warfare. "Strategic necessities sometimes require difficult decisions," he replied. But his voice lacked the conviction of his earlier statements. "Civilian casualties are regrettable, but resistance movements require popular support networks. Eliminating those networks prevents prolonged conflict that would ultimately result in greater loss of life." "That's not strategy," Zara countered, stepping closer despite the weapons trained on her from multiple directions. "That's rationalization. You know the difference between military objectives and systematic extermination. Your tactical brilliance is being used to enable genocide. And somewhere beneath your professional conditioning, you understand exactly what that makes you." The sanctuary's acoustics amplified her words, sending them echoing through stone arches that had witnessed centuries of human moral struggles. Several of Darkwater's soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their expressions suggesting that questions about their mission's ultimate purpose weren't entirely foreign to their thinking. But the moment of doubt passed quickly. Professional discipline reasserted itself, and Darkwater's expression hardened into the mask of someone who had made fundamental choices about loyalty and duty that couldn't be undone by philosophical arguments. "Personal moral considerations are luxury items that professional soldiers can't afford," he said, raising his sidearm with steady precision. "Your mission is complete, Captain Blackthorne. Your brother and the other prisoners are beyond our reach. The intelligence they carry will indeed complicate our strategic planning. But you've reached the end of your operational effectiveness." Zara felt the quantum disruptor fields intensify, her remaining nanobotic functions failing completely as the last traces of enhancement technology died in her bloodstream. She was purely human again, facing impossible odds in a situation where survival had never been part of the mission parameters. But as she stood beneath the cathedral's ancient arches, surrounded by enemies who represented everything she had dedicated her life to opposing, Captain Zara Blackthorne discovered something that no enhancement procedure could have provided: the absolute peace that came from knowing that her choices had mattered. Marcus was safe. The prisoners were free. The genocide plans were exposed. millions of innocent civilians would have the chance to defend themselves because she had been willing to sacrifice everything to give them that opportunity. The weapon she had become wasn't defined by nanobotic enhancements or quantum technology. It was defined by the choice to stand between innocent people and those who would destroy them, regardless of personal cost. As Commander Darkwater's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger, the cathedral's ancient bells began to toll, not in response to any human command, but because the electromagnetic disturbances from their battle had triggered automatic systems that hadn't functioned in decades. The sound echoed across the ruins of Cindermoor like a victory anthem, announcing to anyone who could hear it that resistance was possible, that impossible missions could succeed, and that sometimes individual choices could change the course of history itself. 6 months later, the Valerian Republic's counteroffensive began with precision. Strikes against Korthanian genocide facilities that had been identified through intelligence provided by 31 rescued prisoners. The operation was named Blackthorne Protocol, in honor of the Ghost Protocol operative whose sacrifice had made victory possible. Marcus Blackthorne, fully recovered and promoted to intelligence director, often stood at the memorial wall where his sister's name was engraved among other heroes whose choices had shaped the course of the war. The inscription beneath her name was simple but complete. She walked past them wounded. They had no idea what was coming. The truth of what she had become and what she had accomplished lived on in the freedom of millions who would never know her name, but whose lives had been saved by her willingness to transform herself into exactly the weapon that history required. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.